Hello students, welcome to Scholars, your one-stop solution for IAS preparation. Students, my name is Anubhav Sharma and I am your faculty for Indian Polity. And students, in this module, we are continuing with our preamble modules. That is, we have already studied the first part of preamble. In this module, we will be studying the second part of preamble. In fact, the whole of preamble will get completed in this module. So let's get on with our lecture. As we have discussed some of the important things with respect to preamble in a previous module, let's have a short recap for it. So what exactly have we studied? We studied about how exactly preamble got included in our constitution, what exactly are the purposes of having a preamble in the constitution. We also studied about how we had borrowed the idea of preamble for a constitution from that of United States Constitution, and there we had also studied that both these preambles, preamble of United States as well as preamble of India, starts with the term "We the people of India." So let's get on with the pillars that were left. So the next pillar that is left is Republic. Republic is another keyword which is being used in our constitution, and that is in the preamble. So what exactly do we mean by Republic? Vesting of political sovereignty of the people and not in a single individual like a king. This is what we mean by Republic. Let me just explain it to you. We had studied about sovereignty. In there, we had studied that we as people collectively are able to form a nation. As such, our voice will be heard as one unit, that is the voice of a country, India, right? Now, what exactly is Republic? Whenever in a country, the person who is in charge of the state, the person who is the head of the state, is being elected by the people themselves, then we say that country is a republic. So we have talked about democratic system, we have talked about democracy, that people are electing their representatives. When we talk about republic, essentially our focus is to understand who exactly do we call as the head of the state, and is the process of election of that person, is it via a system like that of a king where it's a monarchical system, or is it an election system as in case of India, or for that matter United States of America? We know in India, the president of the country, the president of India is elected directly by the parliamentarians as well as by the members of legislative assembly. In other words, the president is elected indirectly by the people of the country. As such, one can call India as republic. Now, a point which you need to note here is that when we talk about a country like United Kingdom, while one can obviously call it to be a democracy for the reason they have a democratic system, parliamentary system, something that even we have adopted, but United Kingdom cannot be called as a republic. Why? Because the head of the state over there is the king, is the queen, it's the crown which is the head of the state. Head of the state is not elected by the people either directly or indirectly. As such, United Kingdom cannot be called as a republic. On the other hand, when we talk about United States of America, though they do not follow the parliamentary form of government as is being followed in India, they can still be called as a republic. Why? Because their head of the state is elected by the people of the country. I hope this point is clear, that for the country to be republic or not, it does not have to do anything with it following the system of parliamentary form of governance or presidential form of democracy. This is an important point for you to note with respect to your prelims exam, because students get confused with respect to this point. Anyways, the absence of any privileged class and hence all public offices being open to every citizen without any discrimination is the nature of the republic. Essentially, what we are trying to say in this point B is that when we talk about monarchical countries, monarchical system of governance, what exactly do we see? That there is a system of aristocracy, that is a kind of a feudal system where the king is appointing important officers, not on the merit of that officer, not on the basis of an open competition, but just with respect to the liking of the king. Now, when we talk about a country like Republic, essentially what we see is that not just the head of the state is indirectly or directly elected by the people will always have an open system of competition in order to compete for government jobs. I hope this point is also clear. The term republic indicates that India has an elected head instead of a monarchical head called the president. Here is the present president of India. He is elected indirectly for a fixed period of 5 years. I hope this point is clear, that India is a republic. Why? Because we have a system in which the head of the state, that is President of India, is elected indirectly by the people of the country. right? Now, now we come to the next pillar of the preamble, and that is justice. What exactly do we mean by justice? What exactly do we mean by justice when we use it in context of preamble? The term justice in the preamble embraces three distinct forms of justice, जिसको हम न्याय कहते हैं. What exactly are the three different forms of justice? First is social justice. Second is economic justice. Third is political justice. So, what exactly preamble is trying to say? That with this constitution, what we are trying to do is to bring about, is to administer justice to people of India. This justice is of three types. One is economic justice, second is social justice, and third is political justice. How exactly Constitution is able to deliver these justice? By use of fundamental rights and directive principles. When we read about these fundamental rights and directive principles, we will actually be able to connect it in a much better sense. But for now, just keep it in mind that what exactly are we achieving by fundamental right and directive principles? Not just liberty, but also of a kind of justice, that justice being looked upon as social justice, economic justice, and political justice. Now, the next question which must be coming in your mind is, what exactly do we mean by social justice, economic justice, political justice? Let's try to understand that. So, when we talk about social justice, what exactly does it denote? It denotes the equal treatment of all citizens without any social distinction based on caste, color, race, religion, sex, and so on. So what exactly is justice? Justice मतलब न्याय, न्याय मतलब एक ऐसी प्रणाली, a system by which everyone is being treated in a fair manner. When we talk about social justice, essentially our idea is to understand the inequalities that exist in a society. These inequalities should not be of a nature by which any kind of injustice is happening. Thus, the idea of a constitution would be to bring about social justice, that is, it will try to ensure that any way in which social discrimination is happening, opportunities is being grabbed by only a section of the society, any way in which people of the weaker section are not being given their due credence, they are not being treated in a fair manner, or for that matter, they are not being given their due share of responsibilities and opportunities, then our constitution will step in. We will create a system of framework by which social justice can happen in the country. I hope this point is clear. It means absence of privileges being extended to any section of the society and improvement in the conditions of backward classes. So how exactly are we reaching to social justice? The first thing that we need to ensure is that there is no system like that of aristocracy or a feudal system. That is, जो जमींदारी system होता था, essentially that kind of system should not be there. That is one. Then there used to be a system in which titles were being conferred to people of India, which the Britishers used to like Rai Bahadur, Shan Bahadur, so on and so forth. What exactly is it doing? What it is doing is to create different strata of citizens. People who can call them, who are being called as Rai Bahadur, are being treated in a different manner as compared to a normal person. This again was looked upon as a way in which social injustice is being incurred. Thus, we need to ensure that there is absence of privileges, there is absence of feudal system, there is absence of aristocracy. Then only will we be able to ensure that social justice is happening. I hope this point is also clear. Then we talk about economic justice. What exactly economic justice means? Essentially what it means is how far the country, the state is trying in order to make sure that all citizens of the country are economically empowered. The idea of economic empowerment does not only entail that we work towards bridging the inequalities, but it also includes ways in which we are able to create more economic opportunities for people of lower strata so that they are able to increase their material wealth, they are able to come good on their social status. Let me again explain. What is economic justice? In a country like India, where there are people, there is inequality on the basis of economics, on the wealth they have. It is the duty of state to ensure that people who are of lower economic strata, people who are poor in terms of their financial status, opportunities are being created for them to come up. It is the duty of state to make sure that as far as possible, in a fair, in a proper procedure, they are inculcating those policies, they are administering those policies by which inequalities can be decreased. This is what we mean by economic justice. Please keep this in mind. What is economic justice? It denotes the non-discrimination between people on the basis of economic factors. So it cannot be the people who are from the poor are being treated in a different manner, while the people who are rich are being treated in a different manner. Administration of justice, administration of law and order, administration of policies, all citizens will be taken at par. No one will be given privilege of one over the other. A very simple example of it is when we look into the idea of voting. In voting, the value of everyone's vote, the person who may be the richest in India or the person who may be the poorest in India, the value that vote will possess is exactly the same. This is a way in which one can say that economic justice is happening, because the idea is that we are not trying to understand discrimination on the basis of caste or color or creed, but this is only on the criteria of economic status of a person. So all steps taken in order to bring about economic equality and economic equity will be a part of economic justice. To involve the elimination of glaring inequalities in wealth, it involves the elimination of glaring inequalities of wealth, income and property. A combination of social justice and economic justice denotes what is known as distributive justice. So what is distributive justice? Students, this is again very important, not just for your polity prelims and mains, but also for your ethics exam. Distributive justice means how exactly do we distribute the resources of the country in the most equitable manner? How exactly should we be distributing the factors of production among the people so that it can be called as fair, it can be called as just? This is what we mean by distributive justice. How exactly we make those policies by which that is getting happen. For example, we have a system of taxation called progressive taxation. What exactly does it say? Essentially, it creates different slabs in terms of people who are earning different kind of incomes. So for a person who might be earning less than a stipulated amount, for the convenience of our example, let's say 3 lakh rupees, we will say this person will not be charged with any tax. But if a person is earning more than 3 lakh, but let's say he's earning less than 6 lakh, we say, well, this person should be paying 15% tax. Then a person who's getting more than 6 lakh, furthermore, then let's say a person who's earning more than 25 lakhs, then he will be subjected to the highest kind of tax slab that we have. What exactly are we seeing? We are seeing progressive taxation happening. What is the idea of progressive taxation? That the person who is in the lower strata of economy should not be subjected to the same level of taxation as a person who is in the higher strata of the economy. Thus, this is a way in which we are trying to balance the economic wealth. Thus, distributive justice is happening. This is just one of the examples by which we can understand what exactly do we mean by distributive justice. Then comes the another form of justice that our preamble talks about, that is political justice. What is political justice? Essentially, it implies that all citizens should have equal political rights and equal access to all political offices and equal voice in the government. So what exactly are we trying to say? Political justice mainly entails with rights of the people, that is political rights of the people. Rights of a person being the citizen of a country is what we call as political rights. When we talk about political justice, it is to create a system by which every person of the country has equal political rights. By political rights, what do we mean? That every person can go and vote, that every person has the opportunity to come up and get elected by the people and be a part of the office, that every person can sit in an open competitive exam on criteria which by no means can be called as discriminatory. This is what we are trying to say when we say what exactly do we mean by political justice. That is, all citizens should get equal political rights, that fundamental rights applies to everyone. The laws are equally applicable to everyone. Equal access to all political offices. Like if a person wants to join any political party, any political ideology, it's up to him. A person wants to stand in election. If he wants to sort of, get elected and be a part of the parliament, that person will have that opportunity. And equal voice in the government. The person will have the right to express whatever he wants to say to the government or on the issues of legislature that is being tabled. This is what we call as political justice. The ideal of justice, social, economic and political, has been taken from Russian Revolution 1917. So when we look at Russian Revolution of 1917, one of the fallout of it was that the ideas of justice came about, and that idea of justice entailed social justice, economic justice and political justice. Since most of the people who were in the leadership position during the time of independence and a part of Constituent Assembly were heavily motivated and inspired by Russian Revolution, and the ideas that came out of it, one can clearly see that they were trying to bring some of those ideas into the way in which our constitution will also function. I hope this point is clear. This again is a point that you need to keep in mind with respect to your prelims exam, कि जो justice का ideals of justice है, that is social justice, economic justice, political justice, वो Russian Revolution से लिए गए हैं. Now we come to the next pillar of preamble, that is liberty. Liberty, the first thing that you need to keep in mind is a fallout of the French Revolution, and we have actually taken it from French Revolution. What exactly is liberty? The ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity in our preamble has been taken from French Revolution. What exactly does liberty means? Number one, absence of restraints on the activities of an individual, and number two, providing opportunities for the development of individual personalities. Now students, this point has been asked in form of a question in UPSC. So that is why I'm trying to say that these things that we are studying is very, very important. Questions are being asked, and as it is, what we are reading here is the way in which you need to decipher the statements given in the UPSC. And let me assure you, since I have taken it from the NCERT directly, there is no chance of it being wrong. So what exactly is the definition of liberty? What exactly do we understand by liberty? The first thing that we need to keep in mind, that it means absence of restraints on activities of an individual. Here by restraints we don't mean all sorts of restraints, we mean all ways in which a person can express himself in the most effective manner, a way in which a person can do creative things in the most effective manner, a way in which a person can take up a job which he likes, which is permitted by the society. This is what we are trying to say, absence of restraints, that a person should not feel restrained in order to do something. Now, why exactly is it important in context to India? For the reason, during the time of Britishers, what exactly did we see? That the whole idea of Indians trying to express themselves, to be a part of civil services, to be part of judicial services, to be a part of government, to be a part of legislative council, all of that were all full of restraints. They were restraints which were being put on Indians, and their liberty was being curtailed. Even with respect to the Indian civil services, that the system that was started by Britishers, during that time, the conditions that were being imposed on Indians used to be a lot different for the conditions that were being imposed for the candidate from British background. So a Britisher would have a lot easier qualification criteria in order to get into services, but for an Indian, the qualification criteria used to be a lot higher. Essentially, what are we seeing? What we are seeing is that liberty is being curtailed by the Britishers. In the same way, we had Rowlatt Act, we had acts where the press freedom was being curtailed. Again, what are we seeing? That people are being restrained in order for them to not be able to express themselves in the effective manner. If someone wants to say something, someone wants to criticize something, that person is not being allowed to do so. And that is what we mean by restraining someone's liberty. Thus, what exactly liberty means? First, absence of restraints on activities of the individuals. It also includes one more thing. It includes that Constitution will thrive, Constitution will try to provide opportunities for all for the development of individual personalities. That Constitution will not discriminate between people on the basis of the choices that they are making. If the choices cannot be called as illegal, if the choices can be called as socially acceptable, the Constitution will make sure that these choices are being protected and opportunities are being given to every person in order to fulfill their dreams. This is what we call as liberty. For example, if a person who comes from a very poor background, if a person who's, let's say, is a son of a farmer and he wants to become a civil servant, the idea of giving him liberty does not only mean absence of restraints, that is, we are imposing all sorts of conditions on that person in order to appear in the exams, as used to happen in the Britishers' time. It also includes how well we are able to create a system by which we are able to bring opportunities to this poor person so that this person can also be a part of a civil services. If a person wants to be an architect, if a person wants to be, let's say, an engineer, all sorts of opportunities should be created so that liberty of that person is finding space, liberty of a person is allowing him to find all opportunities for development. I hope this point is also clear, and as I have said, this question, this meaning of liberty has been asked in UPSC prelims before. Preamble secures to all its citizens of India liberty of what? Liberty of thought, that with respect to what you want to say, what things that you're thinking, what you want to express. That thought is being a part of liberty. Expression, if you want to express your thoughts, if you want to express your ideas, if you want to criticize, if you want to support, that expression is a part of liberty, the way Constitution sees it. Belief, if you believe in something, that belief may be rational, that may be irrational, that belief may be something which is personal, that belief may be a belief of the community, as long as it is not interfering with someone else's life and dignity. Liberty of the way Constitution looks at liberty, that belief system is also getting protected. Faith, of course, is your belief in the religion. Whatever may be your faith, that faith may be with respect to one religion or the other religion, or for that matter, you may be a person who's atheist. All sorts of faith will get protection under the Constitution because Constitution sees it as a part of the liberty. Worship, the way you seek to worship, your rituals, your customs. Liberty provided by the Constitution is not absolute but qualified. This again is a statement which can be asked in your prelims exam, and this is a true statement that liberty in context to Indian Constitution is not absolute but is qualified. What exactly do we mean by qualified? It does not mean licensed to do whatever one wants to do. Rather, it has to be enjoyed within the limitations mentioned in the Constitution. Now, students, you might be getting confused what exactly are we trying to say, because you're getting mixed messages. On one hand, I have just explained to you that liberty entails giving all sorts of opportunities and bringing restraints to the bare minimum. There should be absence of restraints when we talk about liberty. On the other hand, what we are trying to say, well, it does not mean license. Liberty, you having liberty means you having the license to do whatever you want to do. But what exactly does it mean? That you need to work within the limitations which the Constitution says. So certainly both things cannot go hand in hand. There is some confusion here. Let me clarify it to you. Now the Constitution, if you look at it from its text, from its meaning, from its inference, is a very liberal document. But Constitution, at the other hand, also recognizes that with all the powers, with all the rights, there are also duties, there are also responsibilities which a citizen must understand and which the state must ensure. For example, it can be that you have the liberty to expression. You can express your ideas, you can express your thoughts. I also have the liberty to accept or not accept your ideas, but certainly it cannot be that your liberty to speech, your liberty to expression extends to a point where it becomes abuse, where it becomes hate speech. What exactly is happening then? When you are being abusive to someone, when you are spewing out hate speeches, what exactly you are doing? You are curtailing, you are attacking someone else's liberty for the reason that person is not feeling secure, that person is not getting the assurance of the Constitution that we had spoken about in the philosophy of Constitution. As such, Constitution of India, while being a very liberal document, also identifies, also understands that liberty cannot be absolute and it must always be qualified. Having absolute liberty might actually mean that someone else's liberty is getting compromised, and having qualified liberty on one hand can have a liberal outlook, can give all these ideas its space, that is liberty of thought, liberty of expression, belief, faith, worship, and on the other hand it will also provide all sorts of opportunities and development for the individual personalities, but it cannot be at the cost of someone else's liberty. This is all that the statement is trying to say. And let's say there is a question which is being asked in your mains examination. This is what you need to explain, that the idea of India's liberty of being qualified and not absolute does not mean that there is an illiberal nature, illiberal outlook of the Indian Constitution. It only means that Indian Constitution clearly identifies what exactly liberty entails and what liberty cannot entail. That is, it cannot be that you start giving hate speeches or abusing someone which will tail someone else's liberty. Then we talk about the next pillar of our preamble, that is equality. What is equality? It means absence of special privileges to any section of society and provision of adequate opportunities for all without any discrimination. In India, we know we are inherently a socially unequal society. There are economic inequalities also, there are social inequalities also. We also see inequalities based on the communities, based on the religion, so on and so forth. So when we talk about equality, when the Constitution talks about equality, what it means that there is no special privileges to any class. There is absolute absence of special privileges, so that all society, the members of that society, can be at par with each other. Secondly, equality also means that provisions are being created for adequate opportunities for all without any discrimination. That there cannot be discrimination whenever opportunities are getting created. Whosoever is most qualified, whosoever has the maximum merit should be given that opportunity, is what this statement is trying to say. The preamble secures to all citizens of India equality of status and opportunity in all three dimensions, that is civic equality, political equality, and economic equality. So what exactly preamble is trying to do? That we want equality of status and opportunity in all dimensions of a person, that is civic equality, political equality, and economic equality. Let's try to understand them one by one. So when we talk about civic equality, essentially it is nothing else but what we just studied in the political justice, that is all the ways in which a person is being politically empowered. All political empowerment which is being done to every citizen is exactly the same. That is, when we talk about fundamental rights, Article 14 to 18, what exactly do we see? Equality before law. All people are equal before law, rich, poor, higher caste, lower caste, any people, male, female, all of them are equal before law. Prohibition of discrimination on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. Equality of opportunity in matters of public employment, a point which I just covered. Abolition of untouchability. Why exactly abolition of untouchability is required? The reason is very simple, that even that class of citizens which were being called as so-called untouchables are a part of the mainstream. They should be treated as a part of a mainstream. As such, any activities by which their dignity is getting compromised, any activity, any practices by which they are being treated as a second-class citizen is absolutely not permitted. This is a very important component of civic equality, that is prohibition, abolition of untouchability. Then abolition of titles, again a point that I have discussed, that during the time of Britishers they used to give all sorts of titles, Rai Bahadur, Ye Bahadur, Wo Bahadur. So when we talk about abolition of titles, what exactly are we trying to do? We are trying to bring about civic equality. I hope this point is clear. Then we come to political equality. What exactly are the ways in which we can achieve that? No person is to be declared ineligible for inclusion in electoral rolls. And secondly, elections will be done on the basis of adult suffrage. When we talk about political equality, essentially what we are trying to say is that any person can stand in election, can fight elections, and secondly, any person can also participate in election. The person can go and vote for whomsoever he likes. This is what we are trying to do by political equality. Then we talk about economic equality. How exactly is it done? It is being done with some of the directive principle of state policies. When we study about DPSPs, we will study about ways in which economic equality is happening. We will study about them when we study about DPSP. Another very important pillar of our preamble is fraternity. What is fraternity? And you may be wondering why exactly is it necessary to mention it. Fraternity means a sense of brotherhood. Why exactly do we require a sense of brotherhood? Why exactly is it the duty of the state to create an environment where there is a sense of brotherhood? On one hand, we talk about equality, that is how exactly state is treating its citizens. On the other hand, it is important for us to understand that even people, how exactly are they conducting themselves, how exactly are they treating the other communities, people who are different from them. That aspect should also be covered in the way in which we try to create a constitution. One of the ways was, of course, that the negative way, that is in which we are abolishing some of the social practices like untouchability. But on the other hand, we should also have positive reinforcement. We need to also create an environment by which people feel a sense of brotherhood. This is most important for a country like India, which is inherently a very diverse country. People of all sorts of faith, people of all sorts of ethnicity, languages, cuisine, so on and so forth are residing under one umbrella, that is India. As such, what is required is that Constitution is also doing its bit in order to ensure that the secular nature, that secular culture of the country is manifesting into a sense of brotherhood, a sense of भाईचारा, भारतीय होने का एक एहसास, ये है fraternity. This is what we call as fraternity. How exactly Constitution is doing so? It is doing so by system of single citizenship. What exactly does it mean? When we talk about a country like United States of America, what do we see? That a person possesses citizenship of two kinds, one of his own state and one of the country. But when we talk about India, despite all sorts of diversities, states even being made on linguistic basis, what do we see? That our constitution gives the provision of single citizenship, that if you are born in India, irrespective of the state, irrespective of your mother tongue, irrespective of your religion, you will be called as Indian. There is only one citizenship, that is you being an Indian. You being an Indian also means that you can travel all across country without any barrier. There cannot be a base in which your movement is being stopped on the basis of you coming from any other part of the country. This again is a way in which we are trying to promote fraternity. Today, what do we see? That when we look at IT companies, we look at hubs like Bangalore, we look at hubs like Chennai, we look at hubs like Mumbai. These are these hubs where people from all across the country are coming together and working for some IT companies. They are able to do so for the reason there is no visa that they need to take in order to come to these cities and work for the companies. They are helping in nation building. There is a sense of fraternity that is getting built. Another example, though not that suitable, is what we see in IPL. What exactly do we see in IPL? We see that people from all over the world are coming and they are being a part of the franchise cricket in India. So we have someone like A.B. de Villiers who now identifies himself as a member of Royal Challengers Bangalore as a Bangalorean. What exactly is it doing? There is a kind of goodwill, there is a kind of fraternity which is getting developed among cricketers of different nations. This is what we are trying to say with respect to fraternity. Then when we talk about fundamental duties, Article 51A, what exactly does it say? It says that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to promote harmony and spirit of common brotherhood. So one can clearly identify that when we talk about fundamental duty also, idea of fraternity is finding its place. Article 51A में जो पहला ही प्रावधान है वो ये कहता है कि हर नागरिक की जिम्मेदारी होगी कि वो हार्मनी, भाईचारा अपने आपस में, अपने भारतीयों में उसको प्रमोट करे, उसको जाहिर करे, ताकि भारत एक यूनाइटेड नेशन की तरह हमेशा काम करे. दैट इज पीपल ऑफ इंडिया ट्रांसेंडिंग रिलीजन्स, मतलब you should be able to transcend, you should go beyond your differences. Your differences can be religious, linguistic, regional or sectional. This again is indicating to what? That Constitution is not only trying to give us equality, it is also trying to emphasize on the idea of fraternity, on the sense of brotherhood. Preamble declares that fraternity has to assure two things: dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the country. This brings us to another two important terms which has been used in the preamble. First is unity and integrity of the country. What exactly does it mean? The word integrity has been added by preamble by 42nd Constitutional Amendment. That is, the idea of preamble, the idea of this constitution is to ensure that we are ensuring the integrity of the country, territorial integrity as well as communal integrity. This integrity word got added after an amendment. That this amendment was the 42nd Constitutional Amendment that was done in 1976 by Indira Gandhi government. Again, a very important point for your prelims exam. It embraces both physiological and territorial dimensions, psychological and territorial dimensions of national integration. That psychologically people should feel integrated, they should not feel discriminated. For example, we see people of Northeast getting discriminated when they come to parts like Delhi, Bangalore. So what exactly are we saying? That psychologically there is not a feeling of unity and integrity which is happening. This again is going against the ethos of Indian Constitution. A point that you can use in your mains examination. Anyways, coming to dignity of the individual. Now it's very tough to explain what exactly do we mean by dignity of an individual. So what we'll do is to rely on what K.M. Munshi has said. Dignity of the individual signifies that the constitution not only ensures material benefits, material betterment, that is, a person is getting empowered in terms of his economy and his status, but it also maintains a democratic setup, but also recognizes that the personality of every individual is sacred. Let me just explain this point so that it becomes absolutely clear. Now, when we talk about dignity, essentially what we are trying to look at is not the dignity of a community, but the dignity of an individual. Dignity of an individual is something that is unique to that person, and that is something which needs to be protected, and that is what the Constitution of India is trying to say. Let me give you an example. So we have the abolition of Section 377, which essentially what exactly was it doing? What it was doing was that it used to criminalize homosexuality. Supreme Court identified it to be an attack on the dignity of an individual. That even though this community may be in minority, this community may be only in few numbers, it certainly cannot be that this person's personality, which is something of a personal nature, of a private nature, is being criminalized by the state. It cannot be that consenting adults, even if they are engaging in homosexual activities, can be construed as a crime, and to look upon it as a crime can actually be seen as a way in which their dignity is getting compromised. This is what we are trying to say with dignity. Dignity does not entail only the material betterment, that is, that we are doing everything in order to make sure that you are able to get those material benefits which should be common to all the people. A very simple example is the Swachhata Abhiyan, where toilet construction was happening. What is toilet construction? That it cannot be that we live in a country where people are going for open defecation. We need to create that environment and infrastructure by which there is a toilet in every house. This is what we call as material betterment. This again is a way in which we are able to bring dignity to the woman. In the same way, we had the Ujjwala scheme that by which we are trying to bring LPG to every house. Yes, there are some shortcomings to this scheme, but by and large, the idea is again to bring dignity to the woman, that it cannot be that they are always taking up those activities with respect to cooking, which results in their health getting compromised. So this is what we are trying to say with respect to material betterment. But dignity also entails recognizing that the personality of every individual is sacred. This is where the idea of abolishment of Section 377 came about. This is where right to privacy was identified as a part of Article 21 as a fundamental right. What is right to privacy? That a person in his personal space will do some things, will have a way in which he wants to lead his life, and all those things will be considered as sacred, will be considered as personal, and will be considered as a part of someone's dignity. So all those activities on the part of state or any other company by which someone's privacy is getting compromised, we would say that person's dignity is also getting compromised. I hope this point is absolutely clear. This is ensured through some of the provision of the fundamental rights, like we have Article 21 and Directive Principles of State Policies. We will discuss about them when we discuss about DPSP. Fundamental duties also ensure same as it asks for every citizen to renounce practices which are derogatory to the dignity of a woman. Why? Because dignity of a woman should not be compromised. Then there is another example that to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. Now there are some points, students, which you would need to keep in mind. Let's try to understand these points. First, preamble is a part of basic structure of Indian Constitution. This is something which was established very clearly. Generally, there is a confusion with respect to it. The confusion was mainly because that previously it was said that preamble is not the part of the Constitution, but then there was a judgment of Keswananda Bharati where court said not just preamble is the part of Indian Constitution, but preamble can also be amended by the legislature, though the nature of amendment should only enrich it. It cannot take away some of the important provisions which are already there in the Constitution. Anyways, preamble is neither enforceable nor justifiable in any court of law. So when we look at fundamental rights, what exactly do we see? That these are rights which has been given to every citizen. With respect to these rights, if your rights are getting violated, you can go to the court and you can get these rights being enforced. Like state must act in a way in which your rights are not getting compromised, and if they are getting compromised, remedy should be done as soon as possible. But when we talk about preamble, something that we need to understand is that this kind of provision is not there. That is, if a citizen believes that in some way any of the provisions which has been mentioned in the preamble, any of the statement, be it economic justice, social justice, so on and so forth, is not getting met by the actions of the state, he cannot approach Supreme Court and have a remedy with respect to it. Preamble cannot be enforced and not justifiable in any court of law. I hope this point is clear. Another point to keep in mind is the preamble is neither a source of power nor a source of limitations. It is not a way in which the legislature should feel limited, nor is it a way in which legislature should feel empowered. This is just a way in which legislature should get some kind of insights as to what kind of society that constitution seeks to create. And the biggest purpose that preamble is serving right now is for the Supreme Court. Why? Because whenever there is a question of interpretation of any of the provision of the Indian Constitution, Supreme Court relies on what is written in the preamble, and Supreme Court in that light looks at the interpretation and comes out with the right interpretation of what was written in the Constitution. I hope this point is also clear. Its importance lies in the role of the interpretation of the statutes and various provisions of the Constitution. Few more things. Is it a part of the Constitution? In Beruberi case, as I just explained, it was taken as not the part of Constitution, but then there was Keswananda Bharati case of 1973. What exactly did it say? First, preamble is a part of Constitution, number one. Second, it is amendable by the Parliament as any other provision of the Constitution. Plus, it also said the nature of amendment must be something by which we are able to enrich preamble. It should not be something by which we are taking away any important provision of the preamble. Preamble has been amended only once through 42nd Amendment of the Indian Constitution in 1976 by Indira Gandhi government, and we have already discussed that in this lecture. This is all, students, that we had for this lecture. Essentially what we have studied is the things that were left. We have studied about what exactly do we mean by republic. We also studied about liberty. We also studied about fraternity. We also studied about the terms that is unity and integrity of the nation. We also studied about dignity of the individual. All these terms are very important. Then we studied that how preamble is a part of basic structure of Indian Constitution. It is a part of Constitution of India. It can also be amended by the legislature, and the nature of amendment should entail only add-ons being done to the preamble. So this is all we had for this lecture. If you have any doubts, please ask us. For more such videos, please log on to Scholar. Thank you.